All right, guys. Hey, welcome to the Worship Leader Webinar, presented to you by Worship Team Training. And you're not supposed to see her face yet. You're supposed to see my face. What was that doing there? I don't know. But great to have you, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. Worship Team Training. I'm Branon Dempsey, and again, it's a pleasure to bring to you another free Worship Leader webinar. Again, brought to you by worshipteamtraining.com. We thank you guys for signing up. We have over 155 worship leaders and pastors tonight with us. So we just say a special blessings over you and thank you for hanging out with us this evening. This is really going to be, I would say, both inspirational and educational in what we're going to learn together, because this is far more than just talking about the problems that we have in ministry. We're very good at pointing those things out. What we really need are solutions. And how do we get through and bridge all the gaps that are going on in our day-to-day ministry areas, our worship teams, our churches, but also how that crosses over to our relationships in life. And I think that a lot of the time we can get that confused because we're thinking so much about song sets or everything else, but we really want to be thinking about what the Lord has in mind. Inspirational. And what we're going to do, real quick, make sure so that we avoid any audio problems with all the participants below. If you hear an echo, please turn your volume down, okay? And do not have another window open through YouTube, because if you do, that will also echo and you'll hear it back. So just pay attention to your volumes so we don't get feedback like we do on Sunday mornings, right? So this is so awesome to have you guys. And we want to let you know as well that this is a closed webinar. So that means that as we are dialoguing this evening, anyone else cannot access publicly. You've got to be signed up. So in other words, this is a safe place according to how you feel led and sharing. Now, most of everybody else, the 148 people or whatever, will be messaging us through Twitter. So if you have a question, you can do it one of two ways. Through the very YouTube channel you're watching at the comment box below. The most effective way is to use Twitter. But if it's something you don't want anybody else to see, use either the comment box that's also private with just us, or you can email me personally, and let me give that to you. I'm just going to give you info, that's INFO, at worshipteamtraining.com. Again, INFO at worshipteamtraining.com. There are questions tonight that people have already been asking, and a lot of them want to remain anonymous, and they have tough situations that they're going through. So we want to be sensitive to that, and also we want to be sensitive to the overall topic as well. We want to be sensitive to what's happening in people's lives. So be sure tonight that as we go through this next hour, this is not a soapbox. I just want to go through the house cleaning rules. Tonight we are talking about the worship leader and pastor relationship, but also not just how each of us pastor, but also, in other words, it's not just about the senior pastor, but it's about everyone. And we want to make that clear. We're getting Holly here to the left. She's trying to get things ready to go. Holly, hey, good to see you. If you would, turn down your volume on your computer so that way there's no echo, okay? And anyway, we want to make sure that this is not a soapbox for you guys. This is not a time that we're going to tear down our pastors or worship leaders or anything like that. We just want to stick tried and true to the topic and what can we do to help one another in our relationships. Because again, if you're a worship leader, you are a pastor. If you are a children's worker, you are a pastor. You are pastoring people, and that's the bottom line. So that's what we're here to talk about. But we also are here to unveil the masks and talk about the truth of what's happening within our ministries and how, again, we can overcome those challenges. So without any further ado, I want to make sure that you also do a couple of things on your the YouTube channel inside the box. Right above that, where it lists the details of tonight's show, you will find a book gift. That's a free ebook by us, and that's through our mentoring ministry or ministry mentoring program.
Well, I moved. I need to get it turned around.
Ebook link And also, you will find a press kit if you're interested in learning more about our mentoring ministry program. So be sure to look those up, and you can study with me, you can study with Sally. We have 18 other instructors that are ready to go for you. So let's go ahead and get to the whole point of what we came here to do tonight. Amen? So it's great to have everybody. Let's go ahead and introduce some of the guests that we have on with us tonight's show. We have Victor hailing from Tulsa, Oklahoma. How are you doing tonight, Victor?
Yeah, you're
very, very wet.
Very wet. Okay, awesome. Well, we are glad that you're here. And moving on, we got Michael Peeler. Michael, how you doing tonight, Bubba?
I'm great, man. Thanks for letting me be a part of this, Brandon.
Anytime, man. All the time. Glad that you're here. Mark Maddox, how you doing tonight?
Doing great, Brandon. Thanks for having me.
You're so welcome, Alaskan man. Larry, great to have you. How you doing tonight?
Doing well. Thanks for letting me be a part of this.
That's good. We're glad, absolutely, man. Glad that you're here. And Kelly, how you doing tonight? That would be Kelly. That's a note share. I don't know that person. Kelly is right there. How you doing, Kelly? I think Kelly has probably a drop feed, and that happens with some of the technology that we have tonight. Also, this is Holly, who is not.
Hi, I'm here
right now. She'll join us, I guess, whenever she joins us. But Holly, you'll need to turn down your volume, please, on your computer, okay? And then Holly's camera will come up, her feed will come up, and then we'll get Kelly back as well. But without further ado, before we get to our questions, again, when you have a question, just go ahead and bring us up to @WorshipTT. And we'd like to go ahead and introduce our special guest tonight. And again, tonight is May the 14th, 2015. And we'd like to quick, hold on for a second. Tonight,
I don't know why it's doing that.
Talk about.
Because I can usually get a reverse. It won't turn around. I can't get my camera to turn around.
Okay, hold on a minute. I will help her get her. Everybody just stand by just for a moment. I'm going to take care of something real quick. Boom. So we're done. That's good. I'll bring Holly back in. Not a problem. And that's just how you do it sometimes. And technology, but thank you guys for saying. And we need to get on with this because I'm like really dragging this out and this is not good. So let's get going. Long time, Sally Morgenthaler, great, awesome friend, is our special guest tonight. She is an innovator in Christian practices worldwide and best known for her book, Worship Evangelism. It's that green book that was put out in a year called 1998. Some of you guys remember that, I don't know. But Sally, since the late 90s, she has coached congregations from every size and denomination. We're talking seminaries, Ivy League schools, National Worship Leader Conferences, helping leaders navigate changes within their lives. And her skills at facilitating conversations that matter, they have helped worship teams alike and congregations transcend from dysfunctional patterns to develop healthy communication pathways. And also, she is founder of New Day Coaching, which matches quality leaders and forward-thinking congregations. So if you are a worship leader out there and you are looking for another ministry that God has put on your heart that you know, hey, this is what God's called me to do, Sally is your gal to speak with because this is what she specializes in. But she's taught worship leadership for years and years, and as well as with a bunch of well-known seminaries, including Fuller and Osbury and Yale University. Also, she's been a featured speaker at many different worship conferences, and I can just go on and on and on with Sally because I love her so much. And also, she's been newly inducted into helping us construct our ministry mentoring program, and that's what has brought this special event to you this evening. Sally has been very instrumental in helping us put this together. She is also a mentor on our staff. So if you are interested in having Sally to do things with you and for your church, get her up, Sally at worshipteamtraining.com. And we're grateful to have her on. So what we want to do, without further ado, is welcome Sally Morgenthaler. Sally, how are you?
Great to have you. Doing so well. And thank you, Branon, so much for Worship Team Training and what you're doing. I believe in this program. I believe that, churches are they're out there wanting to help, and they just don't know where to go. So I hope they all figure out how to get to worship training, because you are doing such a great job, great experience. The way you set this up, this is practical help. It's really well thought out and time-tested ways of leading, time-tested ways of getting in, going granular, helping people musically in their leading, constructing a band. I mean, everything from the top down, theologically, philosophically. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sally. I really appreciate that. You're a doll. And there, I mean, just wow. I mean, I think about Sally. I'm gonna share more of her story later on, but I'm telling you, Sally has been with me through my ministry experiences that happened just about the same time after her book came out. So it's a special treat for me personally to have Sally on with us. But this is a treat for all of you, because you're really going to learn a lot of great stuff. Let's say hello real quick to Holly Harris, who is just now joining us. Holly, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good now that I'm all turned around here.
No problem. It's great to have you this evening. Be sure everybody to use the chat window and the icon in the upper left. If you got a question, please send it that way so we can get to it. And also, again, people out there watching us, pastors, worship leaders alike, @WorshipTT is the best way through Twitter. If you have an email that you just want to send it this way to us privately, info@worshipteamtraining.com. All right, so let's get to the questions, shall we? Come on, it's been way too long now. So our first question, we are talking about the differences within our the different planets that we come from, so to speak. It's like, women from Venus, men from Mars. Worship leaders are from one place. Pastors, I don't know where they come from, but they come from somewhere. So let's hear your questions about the differences. And our first question that we have is from Michael Peeler. So let's get to your question, Michael. You say, how do we maintain a strong theology for our congregation with a shortened set list? Now, within that, does everybody understand that question? How do we maintain a strong theology for the church within the short number of songs that we're going to sing? Now, this is a very good deal between pastors and worship leaders. So, Sally, you want to give us a stab on that? How do we maintain a strong theology?
Well, one of the realities of church life is that it's a school. Luther talked about churches being a school. You get people once a week, and maybe they'll go to a small group, or maybe they won't. So, but you have to figure on Sunday being the time where you are helping them to understand who God is, who we are, and what it is to be in relationship with God. And I find if some people are going to just attend once, and maybe they'll wait for a while. But just figure, for most people, you're going to get a shot at it at least 2.5 weeks a month. Now, some of you may laugh at that, but that's pretty much the average attendance that we are seeing, the attendance patterns. That's probably one of the biggest. We've got a lot of news going on in the last year. Some just came out about 10 days ago that we were gone from a 78% of Americans claiming that they're Christian to 70%.
Wow.
And that's since 2008. So in 7 years, there's been an 8 percentage point drop, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But the other thing that most people don't realize is that we've gone from, maybe 20, 30 years ago, people going 4 times a month to less and less. So let's say you even have 2.5 times with the average attendee. It makes it much more important that you and your pastor are working on a cohesive service, because impact, you can't say everything in one service, but whatever impacts people, they will remember, right? So whatever piece theologically that you and your pastor believe that it's important to drive home about who God is, who we are, and what our relationship with Him is supposed to be like, that piece needs to come across really strongly. So I don't think most of us are going to get a chance to do the whole smorgasbord of theology for everybody every week. Our liturgical churches manage that in a way that many of us don't want to go back to, but they managed it through their own liturgies, which basically reviewed the story of creation, the story of reconciliation through Jesus Christ, and then looking ahead to what it would be to be in relationship with God after we die. That's what the Mass was. That's what our old liturgies did for us. Now we are the liturgists. If we don't have forms that give people that whole picture, what are we going to pick out? And I would say, first and foremost, you're going to want a Christ-centered service. You're going to want to make sure people understand who Jesus Christ is, and at some point in there understand what a saving relationship to Jesus Christ is. I think that that's pretty central. But then in terms, if that's not your main theme, after that, maybe the main theme is going to be you're working on the concept of a sacrificial life, becoming Christ-like by sacrificing ourselves. Romans 12:1. Of course, that's a worship verse of all of our life is sacrifice. How are you going to make that impactful? And I will just say, as many of the senses that can be involved in that as possible. So if you have a short set, I think beefing up the visuals so that people are more engaged in the set. Maybe that's going to be, you're going to work with photographs behind the lyrics. Maybe you're going to give them a time to take a look at photos from their neighborhood of people sacrificing for others. That's very impactful when they can see their own neighborhood. So there's the visual. Maybe you will single out one prayer. If you've got 3 songs, maybe that prayer can be something that you can have a prayer writing group that they have actually written a prayer about sacrifice for that Sunday. It comes out of your congregation, it comes in your language, and you can underpin that with an instrumental, but between a couple of those songs, you can lead that prayer. Maybe you're going to want to lead it responsibly so that if you've got a dual screen situation, maybe you can have one screen for one side and one feed for another side. But that's engaging, and it's more than music. So in a short set, you've involved them perhaps speaking out loud, praying out loud. You've involved them more visually, plus the singing. This is key so that they are primed when they get to the message. They get Jesus' sacrifice for them, and they also are getting, okay, I've seen those pictures of those kids that were down at that open lot that's had trash in it for years, and those kids cleaned that up, and they're starting to plant stuff in that place. We can sacrifice ourselves that way. It did not take a whole lot of time, but it's been very impactful, and they will remember it. And you and your pastor, hopefully a team, a worship arts planning team, are going to have a whole lot of fun planning that. Just understand that the shorter the time you have, the better the planning, the tighter the planning. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense. So, Sally, thanks for that. And it looks like that we have a lot of planning struggles. That's a lot of the differences between pastors and worship leaders is the line of communication. So Michael asked a great question there about keeping theology strong. Sally, that was a great response of things that we can do to substantiate what we do as worship leaders. Another question here, Victor, I'm just going to go to you. You had asked, because this kind of comes in line with, Sally, what you were saying. How do we create a better line of communication within pastor and worship leaders to create your worship list? Did I just read that? That's so funny. You guys are like doing the same thing. So that's cool. Victor, can you tell us a little more about what, maybe kind of walk us through what you're going through about that?
Yeah, well, it's a little bit difficult in our church, because right now we really don't know what pastor's going to preach ahead of time. So our worship leaders, huh?
You don't say.
Yeah, I don't say. Yeah. So what we do is basically we between the three of us that lead worship, we come up with our own worship lists. There's been times that just by the inspiration of God that it's just been exactly what pastor preaches about, and there's other times where it's just we went a different theme with what the worship list goes through. My goal, I would love to find a way to plan something with pastor, so even the songs that we pick for time of ministry flows along with what he's preaching about.
Yeah.
There's been times where I've gotten caught playing background music while he's preaching, and I'm there searching through my song list. Okay, so he's preaching about this. All right, I got to start pull this song out, get that ready, but it's distracting because I'm behind our pastor while he's preaching, and I've been asked several times. So, are you on Facebook while you're up there, or?
You may be wondering the same of you.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Are you tweeting during worship?
Oh my goodness.
I get asked that quite often. Even my wife sometimes asks me, "Why are you on your phone?" I'm not. I'm trying to text the text in the back. Say,
So
hey,
what?
we're going to do this song. Hey, tell the band that we need to do this, or well, because there's we don't know what's going to happen, what's
Right.
happening during that worship.
Right. We do the same thing at our church. Anybody else have a relative question that lines up with Victor? You're going through something similar? Good. So how can we better that line? Sally, you want to take a stab at that? How can we better the line of communication?
Sure. Well, and Victor, you're working under like the highest duress as a worship leader to be in that environment, and your pastor probably doesn't realize it. And the other thing too, he probably doesn't realize what it could be. There's a conversion experience that happens with pastors when, and I've seen it often, there's a special event that you really have to communicate about, that you take the time. I mean, it's a huge event, and you're actually able to access, you have time with him to plan, and maybe you haven't had that event. But one of the things that I would suggest to you and others of you out there, which I'm sure nobody has a problem, that you don't get the text or the theme or anything until like Wednesday or Thursday, right? I mean, you're in a little bit better position than Victor. These are not malicious pastors. They're not trying to, just make you mad. They're not trying to put a monkey, crowbar in anything or a wrench in anything. I think most of the time they don't realize how much better it could be when you all can prepare. Not long ago, I was helping a congregation hire a new worship pastor, and I was with the elders. And this is a church of 1,000 people, and the elders actually asked me, "Well, do you think we really need a full-time worship leader? Because basically they just show up on Sunday and you guys get this, right?"
Okay, wait, hold on. Wait, pause that thought. How do you guys feel about that, what she just said? Quickly. Mark, go. How do you feel about that?
Well, I've been told we do 5 songs, so that's 1 song per day for me to plan.
Yep.
So
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Michael, what goes through your mind when you just heard that?
Well, I think part of the flip side is, when he does come up with a plan for a series, and, it's going to be 4 or 6 weeks, but you only are told about that 13 days prior to when it's starting.
Right. Holly, I know something's going on with you.
Oh, well, no, it's my pastor and I get along so well, and we're in a Lutheran church, and so I go through the lectionary off of our LCMS website, and so I'm able to see what the readings are going to be.
No. What goes through your mind when you're told, oh,
that's crazy. It's crazy because there's so much time that's put into this, and lots of prayer and lots of reading.
Right.
Just
and I know the pastors are out there shaking their heads right now going, man, you haven't even been through an exegetical study. You don't know what you're talking about. So it runs both ways. I mean, we both see each other differently. Sally, I had to interrupt because that was a very good point that really resonates with worship leaders.
Yeah, I know it does. You've heard it before.
Yes.
You know, and I was ready because I had just collaborated on the candidate profile with the congregation, and we spent a lot of time in this, and the elders had yet to see it, and so I was able to go down the list of what a good worship leader does, especially worship leader with 1,000 people. But even if you've got 300, you're working really hard. It's, you know, mentoring the tech team, and you know the drill. When I went through this all, and there wasn't a question, oh yeah, we need a full-time plus, right? But I think that there are pastors who don't really understand the complexity of the role of a worship leader, not because they're mean, but they just don't know what goes into it. And so there may be the thought, well, you know, they don't really need anything from me because they're going to come up with these songs, and there really isn't a connection. And worship is really, the worship prep is singing some songs that will help people feel closer to Jesus, and that's enough. Now that's some pastors, but just to go through this, your pastor may be kind of on that, you know, that side of things where he doesn't really know what it can be. And part of our role, I think, just there's several things that are going through my mind right now. One is, my goodness, do you know how many people who tell the pastor he shows up once a week and he's got the easiest job in the world? I'm serious.
Yeah, no,
I have a pastor in the family. I know this. So, yes, on the flip side, pastors go through the same thing. You know, he's got such a cushy job. He just has to come up with a sermon, and that's it. And I think, sermons are big deal, right? So I think if we are open with each other and can actually, you know, start these conversations, sometimes it happens because there's a really cool event that maybe is going to be an outreach event that we really want to have our best stuff together.
Right.
If there is anything like that in your future, even if you have to create it or propose it to your pastor, you know, that service will be fantastic, but the process will be even more fantastic, because as a part of this, what you can do is give your pastor a sampling of what is possible. And even if you can meet with him for an hour, that would be great. Better than just meeting with him, have him over for dinner, plus 2 or 3 other people who are very savvy and passionate about worship, and maybe they're musician. There's a musician, you know, video or, you know, visuals person. Maybe there's somebody who really likes digging up, you know, ancient prayers and kind of reconstituting them in modern language, and get the group together. And you're playing off of each other. You got big Post-it notes, and you're putting those Post-it notes above. You know, each person has got an idea. And you're doing this for this special event, right? And it's energy. It's creative. You've prayed beforehand. You're asking God to bless it, and it's fun. Mm-hmm. And the other thing, it's relational, because I got to tell you, I've been a pastor's spouse, and at one of our churches, it took probably 4 years for anybody to ask us out for dinner. That is not uncommon.
Yeah.
So pastors can be in this bubble. They're really working hard, but their relationships are kind of tricky. In some churches, there actually the unspoken rule is, well, don't be friends with people in the congregation because people don't like it if you play favorites. So they can actually be really isolated as a family. If you have that great experience, that one time of getting together, having a cool meal, and creating together, and then you translate that into a super experience. Okay, you have a convert. I've seen it over and over. You've got somebody who will at least say, I would love to be able to do pieces of that every Sunday. How do we do that? I loved that. Most everything that is change-oriented, transformational, comes out of an initial experience. So that's something for you to think about, but understanding that most of the time, if you're not getting that communication time, I think the pastor just doesn't even realize what could happen through that.
Yeah, that's good, Sally. I think that what you hit on is absolutely true, that much of the time we as worship leaders, we see the pastor in one light, and we don't understand a lot of the pressure that they're under. I've known a lot of pastors, I've worked with a lot of pastors that have gone through very, very turbulent times in which they felt more alone than anybody in how they feel. And I think that one question that is already brewing right now among the chat is this: how do we support one another through the differences in the midst of if somebody's right or wrong? How do we show support? Why do we show support? I think, first of all, it needs to come down to an understanding that we need to have for one another, that your pastor may do things a different way that you're not used to, or they may do things that you wish they would do differently, but they are still human, and they still have as many, if not more, pressures. I think in some ways they have more pressures than the worship leader. Why? Because they are the visible worship leader of that church, and you cannot imagine the pressures that they go through to carry what they feel. We know it's the Lord that carries the church, but the pastors internalize it. They can very easily, and they feel that the burden is on their shoulders. I know that because I've had several pastors tell me that directly. And so I think there's a both and. I think that the worship leader too, they are going through their own set of hang-ups or times of needs, and also their own struggle and their own forms of depression that they just weave in and out of. So I really believe that there needs to be more than the communication line of just getting the set list ready. If that's the only instance and purpose of why your ministry exists in a church, you're not acting like the church. You're acting like a program week to week. And the reality is that both the senior pastor and the worship leader need to be on point together relationally. It doesn't mean they have to share each other's underwear size. That's not what we're saying. But they need to be at a level and a point where they can say, hey, you know what? They feel safe enough to come out and say, I'm going through this difficult time right now. Can you help me? And for each of them not to look at each other as of a, well, let me pray for you kind of scenario, or it's not that bad, or this measuring stick kind of thing. But to get down to that type of relationship, Sally, I know that you would agree, that takes a lot of hard work, and it doesn't come easy. So let me just hear from each of you, Kelly, Michael, and Mark, because you hit upon this, and I just want to address it while it's hot. Mark, can you kind of elaborate a little bit more on what you're feeling right now?
Well, I was just listening to what everybody was saying and what we're talking about in the chat, and just having gone through something like this recently, asking what in the midst of disagreement rather than why is so important, because why indicates or insinuates, or however you want to say it, that I don't trust what you're saying. Why are you doing this? Why do you want to do this? Why are you telling me to do that? And that's a very careful line that I feel like we're treading as worship leaders, because we work in submission to our senior pastor. Mm-hmm. And so rather than why, what? What are we trying to accomplish? What is it you're trying to accomplish? What are you thinking here? because when you start asking why, you're questioning what they're doing, why they're doing it. And you know, I think about it, if you were in that position, if someone's asking you, why are you doing this? Well, they're questioning they're questioning what you're doing.
Right.
And so, you know, you're going to disagree. That's fine. But learning how to phrase what you're saying is so important, and it's so simple.
Yes.
That's basically what I was alluding to.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Can I break in here, Branon, just a second? Yeah, I think the what questions are really important. The first what question is, what can I do to help?
That's a great one. That's an uncommon one, Sally. You know that.
Well, it is. And we have to get, if we're a pastor, that's a great question, if we're a worship leader, because that question gets us out of looking at the other person as in a utilitarian way. We can easily use Sunday as this product that we're creating, and we use each other in order to create it. So we're going for this big thing, the church depends on it, our survival depends on it, and I look at you, whether I'm a worship leader looking at pastor, or a pastor looking at worship leader, I'm looking at you to perform. Perform this task in order that that product become, you know, the way that we think it should be. And if you don't, you know, then I'm not going to like you, or I lose respect for you. And I wonder how, when we do that with our children, or we do that with our mates, when we reduce them to a cog in our wheel, then it's not about relationship. It's not about how we can serve each other anymore. So I agree with you, Mark. That was a profound shift from the whys to the whats. And all I'm doing is just kind of going back to a foundational, what can I do to help, or how can I help? If and I've been a worship leader, if I as a worship leader would have asked my lead pastor that more often, I think we would have had a better relationship, or we would have, it would have taken it to a different level, and all the things that the practical things that we would have needed to have done after that would have this foundation of trust and care. So enough said.
That's awesome, Sally. Thank you for that. And Mark's a very smart guy, so you're getting
well,
going.
I am from Arkansas, so.
But Sally, I high five what you're saying. You know, as far as the asking the pastor, how can I help? That's a huge statement, because it helps disarm both the pastor, and it also helps liberate the worship leader. I love what you said, and the whole idea is getting down to the root of the issue. Michael, just kind of going back to what you said, can you talk a little bit about what was going on in your brain during that moment?
Yes, let me just, to Mark and to Sally's point right there specifically, I think those are key questions, the what and the why, and, you know, I think you have to be able to ask questions, but I love that question, Sally, what can I do to help you? Because so often you never get to the point where you can ask why until that has been an established relationship, until you have earned that trust, until your pastor has seen your heart and seen why you do what you do, and you've seen why he does what he does. You know, after that, then you've earned the right, so to speak, to say, when times come up and there's a problem, you can say, now, why did you do that? What were you thinking there? And so again, it goes back to Mark's point about just how you're phrasing the questions. And so I think that's really important. I think, however, that the what can provide clarity to the situation, and especially if you're working with a group, or you've got to go take this vision or take this worship service plan or this event and communicate it to the other people in the church, whether it's other leaders or the congregation as a whole, to have some of those plans and some of those questions thought out and answered as a pastor and worship leader, as a staff, certainly will curtails some of the issues that could arise down the road.
Right. Good deal. Thanks, Michael. I got something. Two things I want to say. I want to go over to Kelly.
Yes.
Kelly, how? Now there's a two-part question. Number one, how do you handle the disagreement at the time when your pastor, when we're talking about the what and how, you still disagree with your pastor? How do you work through that?
Well, something that has been on my mind, especially, I think you told me it probably back in February through our mentoring program, was you work through conflict. You don't avoid it. And I wrote that down in my journal. I think I underlined it about 5 times. The tendency is to avoid conflict. So if I'm having conflict with my friend or with senior pastor or whoever, I want to avoid it. Well, working through it, you are able to, number one, better that relationship because you have a respect for each other and you start building that that common bond through working through it rather than just ignoring it. And then also, you, rather than burning bridges, you build bridges. And
listen to that gold.
So it's really hard in application, but the fruits of your labor come out when you work through that conflict. And definitely that level of respect. I think you mentioned, Branon, at the beginning about being from different planets. It's a good visualization. I mean, if you just think everyone's speaking a different language, everyone has a different past, everyone has different filters that they're working through. And so by having respect and compassion for that other person, that you don't know everything that's going on in their heart, I think that that can help work through conflict as well.
Right. Okay. So when you say that you work through it, here's the second part of the question. And Sally, I want to get some feedback off of you in a second. Holly, when we are to go through these situations and when we disagree, now this is for the women worship leaders out there who have to serve with a male, if it is a male senior pastor. That can be the most difficult thing in ministry. Right there is that polarity. How do you work through that?
Well, we definitely talk through it. I always have to stop and think of the theology, and is it scriptural? Is it scriptural? You know, am I handling the situation properly? Is he handling it properly? I mean, I always just go to him. I mean, following Matthew 18 and taking those cares to him and those burdens that we, have to work through it.
Sally?
That's really good. That's really good. Excellent. I mean, we talk about Matthew 18, but do we do it? So do we go directly to our pastors? How much are we initiating conversations that might be difficult but need to happen? That's hard if we haven't been able to build a relationship with our pastor, but it could be the way that we do it, by humbly just saying, hey, I would like your feedback on how we're working together and how I am helping you or not helping you. And start with that. Start with, what are the areas that you see where I need growth? Start with yourself. And then build outward. So, excellent there. I would like to talk about this different planet thing a little bit. Is that okay, Branon?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Yeah. I think it's true and untrue.
Okay. What way?
I think it's true that we are all on different planets. If you take a look at all of the personality profiles, from StrengthsFinders to Myers-Briggs to the Enneagram to, there's just a ton of them. 5 Thinking Hats by, I think, Edward DeBono. It's a testimony to the fact that we have different ways of viewing the world and acting in it. We have different perception, different strengths to bring. And learning about those, regardless of which system you use, it can be very, very helpful if you haven't taken a Myers-Briggs test. Some people think that the Enneagram is just new age. The Enneagram is a fabulous tool It's simply built on, ancient archetypes, but so is Myers-Briggs. You might not know that. It's really the different ways of being human over time that people have discovered, oh, there are these types. And it doesn't lock you in, like the Myers-Briggs doesn't lock you in. You can test as an I on a Myers-Briggs as an introvert, and through time become more of an extrovert. But it's really, really helpful. I think if you could work with your pastor, ask him, what kind of personality profile or maybe tool that he might use with his staff, and start using that tool, or maybe suggest one to him that you find, so that you can get a handle on how you work and how he works and get some of the nuances. But let me just tell you on why I think that the different planet thing can be overblown. It's great to understand our differences. It's important, actually, crucial. But the old stereotype that I'm going to talk about between artist and sort of CEO pastor.
That's a good one. Go for it.
Understanding that our pastoral leadership template has moved in the last 50, 60 years from the shepherd pastor to the more of the business pastor of running a congregation. And that's running a congregation of 200 or several thousand. That's been our cultural shift in leadership, and the preferred pastoral style among most congregations now, and when they hire pastors, is a more corporate style.
Right.
So, but I just have to tell you, I have worked in enough seminaries. I've known enough seminarians. I've known enough pastors. I've spent at least as much time with pastors as I have worship leaders. There are, I think, more pastors that do not fit that CEO mold than do fit that, and more all the time who don't fit it. It has become a kind of a straitjacket for many pastors. And for those who never really fit that going in, and their Myers-Briggs is more like INFP, there are lead pastors out there with a Myers-Briggs that's the classic artist Myers-Briggs, if you're not familiar with that. The CEO Myers-Briggs profile is probably more like an ESTJ. But I don't know a whole lot of ESTJs in the ministries. I know a lot of them have the NF, and I won't take the time to really go through that now. But whenever you have a Myers-Briggs profile that has an NF in the middle, you know that there's some kind of artistic temperament. Sensitive, intuitive. I know a lot of lead pastors who have that NF in the middle. So my take after many, many years of being in ministry and working with pastors, especially lead pastors, is that so many are frustrated by this stereotype that they feel they need to uphold to be respected. So I'm going to put that out there, and I'd love to hear a response.
Yeah. How about, can we hear from Larry? Larry, we haven't gone much to you, so I'd love to hear what's rattling in your brain about what Sally said.
I think there is that pressure. I know, like with our senior pastor for years even before I had come on, he had really, he's more of a shepherd type person, and he's really had to learn that CEO role, and not really willingly. He doesn't really feel like he fits that mold. He's good at it. He works really hard at it, but it's not something that comes natural to him. I think there is some truth to that, where you find churches are more and more being run like businesses instead of whatever we're supposed to be, as far as church life goes. But I think that in the same sense, I think that you find a lot of times that like associate pastors or worship pastors kind of fall into that corporate issue too. I think with the pressures that we have building up, being we all have to be type A personalities or whatever, you know, where we fall into that the Myers-Briggs thing where we're strong leaders in that sense versus, you know, leading from behind or whatever. I don't know. That's just kind of, you know, where I've seen some of the things.
Yeah. Cool, man. Thanks, Larry. That's good stuff. You know, something I just want to, I'm curious about, there's two questions left I want to get to, and because I mean, really what we're getting at here is finding the true worship goal. I feel like we kind of skipped to that. So we've talked already about how each of us come from different planets, and Sally elaborated more on that just now, and then worship planning struggles, and then here I feel like we're talking about finding the true worship goal. But before we get to the goal, Mark is saying in the chat that it's better that we ask the hard questions, and that's such a good point, and that's something that Sally hammered on a lot. So what I want to know is, how do we lose this Lone Ranger system? Sally, can you speak into that?
Oh yeah, the Lone Ranger doesn't just apply to pastors.
Yeah.
It really applies to us as worship leaders. We really get isolated in our worlds. You know, I'm just going to go back to the other question and then bridge these in terms of the planet corporate. Can I just call it that? Or what we see in that stereotype? It's starting to go away, which I'm all for. I think that there is management that needs to happen with strong leadership and systems, really good systems in place. So I will say that part of corporate, great, but a sense of not being relational. I think that a lot of people would, when they hear corporate, it's, okay, well, we can't really be intuitive or relational. We can't use that as the driver of our ministry, and that's why I think that is going away. I'm glad for that, and more lead pastors are understanding that the strength of their intuitive skills and their relationality is absolutely needed now. So, and I'm seeing it some in the pastors 50 plus, but I'm seeing that shift quite a bit in the lead pastors who are in their 30s and 40s, that they are kind of looking at their older generation and going, I want to be that guy. Okay? Now, there's a lot they could learn from the older generation, maybe some stuff that they're throwing out, but in terms of relationality, I think that this is starting to turn, and there are new opportunities for you as worship leaders to encourage that relationality. So as far as the Lone Ranger syndrome is part of that corporate thing where I'm at the top of the org chart, right? It's hierarchy, right? So hierarchy creates an underground, a subversive culture.
Wow.
Anytime you have a hierarchy, you've got people who are, you know, that's tightly enforced. I mean, we all need our leadership to look for, but if you are a leader simply because you've got a lot of people under you and your word is the word, that will create subversion underneath. So that is the Lone Ranger up here, whether it's you as a worship leader, and if you're really hierarchical with your teams, you'll have subversion under here because people will feel like they don't have a voice, they don't have an in for collaboration, that it's not a relational system. So getting rid of that Lone Ranger mentality, whether it's us as worship leaders working with our teams or it's with lead pastors and how they're functioning, flattening that a bit. We always need to have the sense of, okay, you know, if there is a final word, you know, maybe we need to you know, leave that with the lead pastor. But this flattening of that hierarchy so that we can work together in collaboration and see each other more as equals. It's that mutuality that we all strive for if we're married in a marriage. And I think that is what we're looking for The Lone Ranger, it's not healthy. It's not, the pastors who burn out, and burnout in pastors is at record highs. And you could also say that with worship leaders. I see the average tenure getting shorter and shorter for all staff in churches.
Right.
This is a tough environment when it's no longer the case that somebody wakes up on Sunday morning and says, hey, I want to go to church.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So this is a tough environment. To be a Lone Ranger in that kind of tough environment is almost just a death sentence. You can't do it. You won't survive. And if you try to do that without depending on each other and without collaborating and really getting the collective, the body of Christ working together, it's a dangerous way to go.
Right. Sally, because we are kind of running a little bit on time here, can you take us through our last question? And I want to hear, this is opening a can of worms at the very end. I'm sorry to do this, but it's a great cliffhanger, right? How do we avoid the pastors and worship leaders' worst fears, and what are they? What are the worship leaders and pastors' worst fears? How do we avoid them?
Well, I think one of the worst fears is that we're going to start losing market share, and that sounds crazy, but
Sounds very corporate, Sally.
It's very corporate, right? But let's just face it, that we're not going to be able to fill those seats. Don't we all feel that on a Sunday? We evaluate after Sunday, how did it go?
Let me just say, worship leader, it is not your job if the church fails or succeeds. Keep going, Sally. Come on.
But of course, because we feel that, though. So I'm just going to put that out there. First of all, are we filling the seats? And I'd love to hear any responses. Is that valid?
Who wants to pop in on this one? Come on. You're all itching. I see you in the cameras. Come on.
That's a little hard. I mean, in Hispanic churches specifically, since our congregation is totally Hispanic,
right.
It's you kind of feel that way. We open the service. We start the service. A lot of people, we have to kick it off the right way. As worship leaders, it's kind of the hardest, for me at least. It's hard to not look, hey, we start service at 10 a.m., not half the congregation's there, it really fills up maybe by the second to last worship song. So right. It is that feeling in you, and you get that sense of it's our responsibility to get the people in on time, get them there, or, on a special service or something to keep them in, because sometimes music is what attracts, at least for Hispanic, music attracts a whole lot more because of, it's what people listen to all day long while they work out in the fields and stuff, and that's something I know personally, I take that more personal, on hand on that.
Holly, what's your thought on all this?
Well, yeah, I mean, it does, it weighs on you. It does, you feel it's a responsibility, but you can't, right now it's the heart of society in the way that they are and whether or not they're hungry to hear the word. You can go and you can pick all the greatest songs and sound the greatest and still not be bringing the people in. Mm-hmm. It's a heart condition.
Yep, very true. Very true. Mark's like popping off now. Go ahead, Mark. What's that?
You
just said it, heart condition.
I'm not popping off. We are called to minister to the people that are there. And now, Kelly said something in the chat. She said, we have to go and find the fish. That's absolutely true. We do need to be reaching out, and our responsibility is not strictly just, the 30, 40 minutes we have on Sunday morning. But when those 30 and 40 minutes start, that group that is there, they are who we're ministering to. And, I had a Sunday this Sunday, and it was like, where in the world did everybody go? A week ago, we had 150 more people in there. So it was crazy, and I had to tell myself, Mark, it's not about the people who aren't here, it's about the people who are.
Mm-hmm. Very true. Good word, good word.
But you just made that fear. Okay.
Sally, go.
Yeah, you just named that fear. I mean, I think what you did is take us through you had that gut thing. You know, we had 150 more. We do that count, right? All of us. We know how to do that count. We can measure it close to, you know, within 5, right? Of how many people were there. So I think that is acknowledging. And then you took a step further. What do you do with that fear? And for you, ministering to the people there is to be present.
Wow.
That's huge. I congratulate you on that. To actually be present. Yeah,
well,
go ahead.
We're human. We're going to see. We're going to recognize that very thing, Sally, that there are not people there that were there before. You may even be able to pick out people and faces and say, I don't know where they're at. But, you know, it's like anything else. You got to make a choice and say, I'm not gonna focus on that. I'm gonna focus on what's going on right here, right now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think on a Sunday morning, you know, that's really important. But also, after Sunday morning happens, like the worship service, that's what happens between Monday and Saturday. I mean, the job doesn't end on Sunday morning at 12 o'clock or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's the point where you go, okay, so-and-so is missing. I wonder what's going on in their life. Let me go call them and see if I can reach out to them. And that's what I meant by go and find the fish. You know, it's not, you gotta work with what you have in the congregation. I had one service that I was leading that had 5 people in it. And they were apologizing. Oh, I'm sorry we only have 5 people, but we had some of the best worship with the 5 people that we had. It was amazing.
That's right.
You know, that was my time to minister to those 5 people. But then after that was when some of the underground work happened, calling, hey, how are you doing? Building those relationships.
Right.
Well, and, you know, here, too, let's also understand that evaluation is not our enemy.
True.
Very good.
That it does make a difference Monday through Saturday for us to take a look and go, how can we engage people better with God? I think that always is our question, not the performance, not the show. The question isn't how can we be the coolest church in our county, whatever. How can we engage better with God?
Right.
And maybe what they're catching, folks, is that we don't have a relationship with each other. People can sense it in a nanosecond, really.
Absolutely.
If the worship leader and the pastor do not have a relationship, if there's something weird going on there, the first order of business is to take a look at, wow, who are we and what are we communicating? But don't make evaluation the enemy. The goal, like you were getting at, Branon, what's the goal? And I guess I'm just saying my goal would be how do we engage people more deeply with God.
Right.
And let's go through it with a fine-tooth comb, not in terms of performance, but how can we provide people with a deeper, more authentic experience? So.
Right. And Neil Baker, he was on with us on one of our last webinars. He just said that's especially true for the church plant. So all you guys that are in startup churches, this is a huge deal. I've been startup church for, I think, 2 ministries of mine, and we had the same thing. The pastor, the leadership was very concerned about the numbers that we're hitting because from a logistical standpoint, they need to keep the church afloat, but there's also a damaging aspect of that too that can hurt the actual ministers that felt measured in that process. Our time is about up. We're getting a lot of thanks from people on Twitter and other guys that are emailing in. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to answer a lot of your questions. I will say this. What I said earlier, that it is not dependent upon you. In some ways it is in terms of the way that you handle yourself, like what Mark had pointed out earlier, the way that you ask questions, the way that Sally had hammered earlier about getting down to the root relationship with our pastor. This goes with all church staff. It's not just a worship leader. It's not with the senior pastor. I can speak this from experience with the church plant that I have went through and my own personal scar that happened years and years ago when I first began leading worship. And Sally, not knowingly, she was there with me in that process. Her book, Worship Evangelism, just came out. I had served with a pastor who was more concerned about the numbers and the chairs and the empty seats rather than what was going on in the hearts of the people who were serving in that church by means of the staff, and myself included. And that was a very hurtful experience, but it's one that I treasure in another weird way, because I've learned how to grow through that experience and to learn that it was not about me, but it was also not about the pastor. It was about what Sally just hit on just a second ago, the Lord, and what kind of service are we bringing Him, in reflection of what Kelly was just saying, 5 people leading worship versus all the 5,000 people or whoever that you can lead on Sunday. It doesn't matter. What really matters is what God is doing within your heart and the heart of your church and the health among your staff. And that's really what we're talking about here. So little does anyone know, but as I went through my experience, and this is also the formation of the book that I'm writing called Confessions of a Worship Leader, that's going to be coming out later on this year. It's been a long process for those of you who've been waiting, but the answer to those questions is also here found, I believe, in this ministry mentoring program that's being offered here through Worship Team Training, where we take a look at the tough questions, we take a look at the challenges that we're going through. And no, it's not so much of a cry on my shoulder kind of thing, but it is a, hey, let me be here that you can lean on my shoulder kind of thing, because I know that I've been through it, and I almost left ministry over it. But God had different plans and told me that, no, Branon, you're not done yet. Just like what Scripture says, what Paul had said in the New Testament, He's not finished with you yet. And I believe that we as leaders, no matter if we're pastors or worship leaders, we still have a long way to go. And so have you know that that book, Worship Evangelism, when I met Sally back in New Mexico at a worship gathering that we had among other peers and worship leaders back in 2005 or something. And when I met her, I was like, wow, you wrote that book. And she's like, no, wait, what did I do? And it's because she did receive a lot of impact from others who tried to misuse that book. And her book, basically, if you don't know anything about it, Worship Evangelism, is a terrific book about how to model worship services in a way that's relevant to today's people. But there's been a lot of groups that have used it in the wrong way, and they've used it as a measuring stick or a ticket device of how to get people into the door, which that was not her heart. And when I met Sally, she told me the first thing she said was, Branon, in some ways I wish I never wrote that book, because if I were to know that people were going to take it at that kind of spin, I would have said it differently, or maybe wouldn't have said some of those things at all. But I will tell you that the church that I was in used that book in a negative way. And it wasn't until when I got out of that ministry, when I began to understand what true worship was, what true forgiveness was, what true healing was, and what true mercy was when later on, I met Sally for the first time, and I shared my story with her. And we sat with 2 glasses of tea, and I remember it very clearly. And she just felt for me. I remember other leaders had gathered around me, and this is right at the beginning when God was calling me to start worship team training. So worship team training goes a lot deeper than just training worship teams. Anybody can teach you how to read a chord chart or even how to put a set list together, but that's nothing compared to when you have somebody like Sally that's walking right beside you in your ministry corner, or anyone else that you can identify in your life. And that alone, my friends, is what's going to carry you in the long haul. It's not about who you are and what you do. It's more about who you are in Christ and what He does through you. So I would like for us to close with that thought, and also just to kind of bring the story back around, later on as Sally and I began to be better and better friends, I couldn't think of a more perfect person to help me partner in this ministry with this mentoring program. So we invite and challenge you tonight. If you are sitting right now behind a computer screen, whether if you're watching this live or you're watching this on a playback, and you're saying to yourself, that's me, or that's my pastor, that's my staff, we encourage you to reach out to us tonight or whenever that you watch the playback of this video, and go to worshipteamtraining.com/mentoring, and also hit us up. My email, Branon@worshipteamtraining.com, whichever. But there's many guys that you're seeing tonight: Holly, Kelly, Larry, Mark, Michael, Victor. All of us are going through something that God has put us through for a purpose, and we want to help walk with you in that journey. Sally's here. We also have Stephanie Kelly, and Tony Guerrero, and a host of many other great guys and gals that are waiting just for you. So this night of this webinar is to offer you not just the what's going on and how to point fingers. No, it's more about how do we find solutions together. And this is just one way of the many. And if God's called you to do something else and to get that encouragement from someone else, then you need to do what God is putting on your heart and to get healthy. So with that being said, I would like to give our special thanks to Sally Morgenthaler. Sally, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We love you.
Thank you, Branon. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
So, and Holly, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Appreciate you.
Yay.
And Holly, just as brand new, she's going to be joining our mentoring program pretty soon too, like by the next 2 weeks. So it's great to have her. And Kelly, an awesome student who's in her second semester. So Kelly, thanks so much for joining us again with us tonight as well.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. And Larry, also brand new to our mentoring program. He starts in like 2 weeks, so it's going to kill me. So, but it's awesome. So great to have Larry. Mark, thank you so much for being here with your wisdom. Mark leads an awesome church of Hot Springs, First Naz of Hot Springs. I keep getting that wrong, but First Naz and Hot Springs. You need to look him up. Great guy. Mark, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me, Branon.
You bet. And Michael Peeler, man, go back ways, years and years. So thank you so much again also, my friend, for sharing your heart.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it.
You bet. Victor, I appreciate what you're doing, man, in the Hispanic culture and community, and we hope to do something with you more closely. So, my brother, thank you so much for joining and sharing your heart as well.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Sally, would you give us the honor and closing us in prayer for this evening?
Oh, absolutely. Lord, this has been such a rich time. You have gathered your people, your leaders from so many different churches, and you've had just the right people here to talk about how we can serve you better and to serve the body better. Lord, everything that's been said here tonight, if it pleases you, bless it. May our words, our thoughts go out and just be another way of glorifying you. May our lives shine for you. May all of our actions as leaders reflect your presence in our lives. And we thank you for this opportunity. We thank you for Branon. We pray your blessing on worship team training and on all the ministries that are represented here tonight, 150 plus of them. Thank you, Lord, for these opportunities to spread the words and spread your healing and saving love. Thank you. In Jesus' name.
Thank you.
Amen.
Amen. Guys, thank y'all so much for joining us. Oh, yeah, by the way, I think we've gone over 60 minutes worth of music tonight. It's 13 minutes over the service. So I just want to let you know. For those of you who are wondering, okay, we have
You'll have to evaluate that before the next hangout.
There you go.
That's
Okay.
right. Be sure to join us on the next hangout because June 26th is coming up with Brandon B. Awesome dude, songwriter. If you don't know him, he's on our website. Great dude. Brandon B. June 26th. Be with us next time. We're going to have also part 2 with Sally Morgenthaler because love her to death. She's just awesome. And so with that, further ado, I know your kids are whining right now and you probably need to get back to bed. So we want to say a special closeout tonight. Guys, thank you again so much for joining us. WorshipTeamTraining.com. We love you, and we'll see you back at the next Worship Leader webinar brought to you by WorshipTeamTraining.com. See you next time.